One of the great things about the streaming services we have now is it gives us access to a lot of foreign language films, particularly when it comes to Second World War films. And over the last few months, I've watched Russian, Norwegian, and a couple of Finnish war films as well. But today on Dragon's Teeth, we're taking a look at the latest German war film, The Tank, or as it was originally called, Der Tiger. Hi, I'm Rob Poyton. Thanks for joining me today for this review of The Tiger. I don't really like the name The Tank. I'm not sure why they translated it as that. I think The Tiger or Der Tiger sounds much better. But anyway, if you look on Amazon, you'll see it as The Tank. So this is a 2025 film. It's written and directed by Dennis Gansel, and it stars David Schütter in the lead role as Lieutenant Philip Gerkens. The film runs for just under 2 hours, and it really opens slap bang in the middle of the action. It's autumn 1943. It's about 8 months after Stalingrad, we're told. We're on the Russian front, the Eastern Front, and we're at the German retreat over the river Dnieper. Now, that river is the third largest in Europe, I just found out the other day, which accounts for that huge bridge. Because when I first watched it, I thought, wow, that seems like a really long bridge. But the Dnieper is a very wide river, certainly at that point. And what we have here is the Germans retreating over the bridge, and they're going to blow it. The bridge is going to go up at midnight. It's just before midnight now. And we have the lone tiger, commanded by our lieutenant, who's acting as the rear guard. Now, I'm not sure if they would have just put one tiger on there as a rear guard at that end of the bridge. Maybe, maybe not. But anyway, that's the situation. And as I say, we are straight into the action. So the bridge is going to be blown in about 5 or 10 minutes. And of course, the Russians are advancing. So we have the lone tiger sitting there. There's a lot of flames and fire going on. Visually, it's very strong. And the tiger, for me, almost looked like some sort of medieval creation. There was one shot in particular, it reminded me of a sort of knight's helm with just the slit, just a knight looking out through the slit. And the T-34s start to advance. And of course, the tiger, being a tiger, calmly starts knocking them out one by one. But then the crew say, Herr Lieutenant, we've only got a few minutes, we better get going. And the lieutenant here hesitates. He's looking at a photo he's got on the inside of the turret there. We assume it's his wife and son. Oh, and by the way, I thought one good thing with this film were the interior shots of the tank. They really did a good job with those. Very claustrophobic, but everything looked right as well, to the best of my knowledge. Another little nice touch at the start here, I thought it was a callback to Jurassic Park, really, was before the Russians arrive, there's that moment of stillness. Everything's reasonably quiet, or as quiet as it gets on the Eastern Front. And then we get that rumble in the ground, that T-Rex moment. And rather than the puddle from Jurassic Park, we get the spent shell casings on the floor of the tank start to shake. That was a really nice touch. Anyway, they're taking care of the T-34s. They've got a little bit of breathing space, time to retreat. The lieutenant snaps out of it and they begin their retreat over the bridge. I think with this part, people most liken it to Fury. It's quite similar in terms of how it's shot. And the only thing I did see in that I didn't like, which I didn't like in Fury either, was there was a lot of tracer fire going backwards and forwards. I suppose in the visual medium, you've got to have something, you know, if there's no tracer, you don't see any bullets going, right? They're just going too fast. You just hear the noise. So I suppose the tracer does give it that visual impact, but it does start looking a little bit Star Wars for me. So the tiger starts retreating back across the bridge. Looks like they're going to make it. We get our first little weird moment here. There's a few more of those to come. When the lieutenant sees a deer just at the side of the bridge, there's all this fire and chaos going on. There's a deer calmly stood there, just sort of looking at him. He looks very puzzled, but they carry on. Looks like they're going to make it, but then the Russian fighters come in, the Ilyushins, the Yabos come in and start strafing the tank. We get lots more flame, big explosions, people in the tank are burning, you know, their hands are on fire, their feet are on fire. And then we cut to the lieutenant sat in the back of a lorry. So we're not quite sure what's happened to the crew, or was he the only survivor or anything else. But he's sat in the back of the lorry now, and obviously he's suffering from some form of PTSD. He's hearing the voices of the crew in his head. So he turns to his medication, which, as we know at that time, for many soldiers in the German army, was Pervitin, methamphetamines, basically. This is one of the themes that develops throughout the film. So he has a dossier with him with some secret orders. He meets up with the crew of the tank, and one question that comes up was how comes we got out of that? And it was that point that I thought, okay, something's up here. Now, I want to avoid spoilers on this because, as you may have read, if you've read any reviews of this, there is an ending. Let's put it like that. So I thought pretty much from the start, well, the deer was one kind of giveaway, I suppose. But at this point, I thought, right, this isn't going to be a normal war film. And I was right about that. So the lieutenant tells his crew about the orders, about this secret mission they've got. Basically, it's a lone tank. They've got to go out into no man's land to retrieve and recover Colonel von Hardenberg and the secret plans that he has. Apparently this colonel has plans for the coming retreat with details of the deployments of all the defences and everything else. So they need to be retrieved. There's some speculation from the crew that perhaps von Hardenberg is a Russian spy. And then someone remembers, Lieutenant, don't you know this guy? And it turns out that Colonel von Hardenberg is the godfather to Lieutenant Gherkin's son. So they've got a strong connection. That's the basis of the main plot throughout the film then. It's this lone tank, Tiger 311, going out into no man's land to von Hardenberg's bunker, and there they've got to retrieve him and bring him back. A lot of people have said online, I suppose maybe just reading the plot, well, this is Saving Private Ryan, isn't it, basically? Well, I disagree with that, because to me, this was much more Apocalypse Now. And I say Apocalypse Now because we have that same idea. We've got this lone vehicle with a small crew on this mission deep into no man's land or enemy territory, and we get these episodes as we go along. So of course you get the usual crew interaction. We've got the old veterans, we've got the youngster, all that kind of normal stuff you get in most war movies. But then I mentioned that weirdness earlier with the deer. We get some other quite strange events as we go along as well. Probably the strangest in some ways is where the Tiger becomes a submarine. In order to escape their attackers, they drive into the river and submerge. Now, of course, we know Tigers could do this. They were equipped with huge snorkels so they could ford rivers because they were too heavy for a lot of bridges. I'm not quite sure if they are able to sit at the bottom of a river like this, turn their engine off and turn it back on again. But having said that, when you know the ending, this makes more sense. And I have to say as well, it does really ramp up the tension. We go into Das Boot territory, which of course is another great German war movie with water trickling down the side of the turret wall and that kind of stuff. We also get strange voices over the radio, and well, I think the most Apocalypse Now section for me is when they come into a village and there's a SS or maybe an Einsatzgruppe in there, and they're basically slaughtering the civilians. They're putting them in the barn and setting fire to it. So Apocalypse Now, this also reminded me, of course, of that very powerful war film, one of the best war films ever, Come and See, the Russian movie that depicts in quite harrowing detail the actions of the Einsatzgruppen on the Russian front. So that's the plot. fairly basic as far as plots go. Go there, get the guy, come back. Let's put that to one side at the moment, particularly that ending, and we'll look at some of the other things. The acting I thought was very good. The soundtrack was very good. That really worked. And the countryside looked right as well. I believe it was filmed in Czechoslovakia. So we've got a lot of open fields and then dense forests. That felt right for that part of Russia. Now, the tiger, let's come to that. That's going to be the big question for all us rivet heads, right? I think most of the time the tiger looked really good, particularly those interior shots, as I mentioned before. Now, I've never been inside a tiger, but I've seen lots of photographs and footage. And of course, every now and again at Bovington, if you're lucky, you can get a sneaky peek. This was a replica based on a T55, and they put interleaved road wheels over the T55 wheels. You can on occasion see that. That is a little bit noticeable in one or two places. But overall, certainly the interior shots and when the tiger's travelling through the countryside and fighting, it looks and it moves and it sounds like a tiger. I've seen online saying, oh, the crew must be SS because they've got the death's head on the collars. Of course, as we know, the Wehrmacht panzer troops also had death's head, slightly different design, and this is a Wehrmacht unit. I'm not sure exactly which unit it's supposed to represent. We learned that they were at Stalingrad previously. Of course, there were no Tigers there, but there were panzer units. So I'm not sure what unit would be. Maybe they didn't identify it because they know someone would pop up and go, oh, the 115th weren't there at that time, they were in Italy, or something like that. Maybe that's why they didn't specifically identify the Tigers unit. So yeah, overall it looks and sounds great, and we do really get that sense of the cramped interior, even in a big tank like the Tiger. The action scenes felt very realistic, noisy, terrifying. You've got 2 seconds to take that shot, otherwise you're going to get taken out yourself. On a slightly broader or deeper theme, there is a lot in here about the effects of war on people who take part in it. And we get certain events in flashbacks come up that obviously have had a great effect on the crew, and particularly the lieutenant. That really forms the backbone of the plot within the plot, if you see what I mean. So this certainly isn't an action movie. It's not an exciting romp through the Russian countryside. It is quite dark, and rightly so. And that's why I said it reminds me more of Apocalypse Now than Saving Private Ryan. Saving Private Ryan is a war movie. We see the landings, we see the mission. Apocalypse Now is a dark drama. I'm not quite sure of what you'd call it exactly, but let's stick with that. It's a dark drama that just happens to be set in the Vietnam War. I feel that's more akin to the Tiger. It's a look at how war affects people and the things they have to do affects them, that happens to be in this particular setting. So in that sense, if you're looking for a sort of wartime action movie, maybe this isn't for you. Although it's not short of action, it did drag slightly in one or two places, but I thought the action scenes made up for that, and the depiction of those was very good. But it is really digging into these underlying themes, and all of that comes into sharp focus with the ending, of course. Now, I'm still on the fence about the ending. I think in one way it was a bit disappointing. In the other, it does tie in with that theme of the film. And I feel that is what they're trying to get across more than the action film. So in that sense, it does work. But I can see why people are disappointed by it as well. Anyway, let's face it, whatever I say or anyone says, if you're a World War II enthusiast, you're going to watch it just to see a tiger in action, right? Okay, so that's pretty much it. Those are my thoughts on Der Tiger. I'd be interested to hear what you think. Pop something down below. Now, I do want to keep it spoiler-free as much as I can. Feel free to discuss the ending, but maybe if you could put spoiler alert and just leave a little bit of a gap. for those who haven't seen the film yet. I would be very interested to see how this is received on a couple of fronts there. One, the story and the plot, but also in terms of realism. We mentioned that slight glitch with the SU-100s, the T-34s, 85s and the road wheels. Did you spot anything else outside of that that took you out of the film? I can't say I particularly did. The SU-100s looked a little bit odd, which I suspect is maybe most of the time they were covered up or camouflaged. I've not been able to find out what they were built on though. Perhaps someone could let me know about that. Thanks for watching then. As always, if you like what's going on the channel, please do subscribe to keep up to date with all our uploads. I'll see you next time.